On the night my grandfather died, he looked at my father and said, "Marry your daughter. Don't let any man touch her, and if she refuses, you know what to do." For 3 days, I lived locked in my room, not knowing if my own father would protect me or destroy me. Hi there, my dear friends. What a joy to have you here with me today. Go ahead and get comfortable, grab a cup of coffee, a glass of water, because today's conversation is going to be one of those that touches your heart. I'm Jessica Silver. I'm 76 years old, well-lived years, and I live here in Cedar Falls, up in northern Montana. It's a tiny little town, one of those where everyone knows everyone, you know? It's right in the northern part of the state, surrounded by ranches, wilderness, hard-working people of faith. These days, my routine is pretty peaceful, thank God. I wake up early, when the rooster's still crowing outside, and the first thing I do is go to my kitchen to make some nice hot coffee. Oh, my children, coffee is sacred to me. Not just any coffee, you understand? I grind the beans myself, the old-fashioned way, with the cloth filter that my mother taught me to use when I was a girl. The smell that spreads through the house. It's like it brings everyone back close to me. You understand? After coffee, I like to sit on the porch and watch the sunrise. My little house is simple, but it has a wooden porch that I helped build with my children, and from there I can see the whole yard, the chickens pecking around, the flowers I plant every year, and in the back, the fence that separates my land from the woods. It's there, on that porch, where I do my crocheting. Oh, crocheting! That's my passion, you see. I started crocheting when I was about 15, but it was much later, when the gray hairs were already coming in, that it became my real refuge. You know how crocheting became such an important thing for me? It was after everything I went through, after peace finally came into my life. I needed something to keep my hands busy and calm my mind, because those of us who've been through trauma, my dears, we know that the mind doesn't stop. It keeps churning, going back, remembering. Then a neighbor here in Cedar Falls, Mrs. Eleanor, taught me some new stitches, and that was it. I fell in love all over again. Today I make table runners, placemats, doilies. I even sell some pieces at the town farmer's market. It's not for the money, it's more to feel that I'm useful, that my hands still create beautiful things, you understand? Here at home, I live with my husband, Ronald. He's a good man, hard-working, who I met many years after everything I'm going to tell you about. We have 3 children, all grown up now, and 6 grandchildren who are the light of my life. When they come here, the house becomes a party. I make cornbread, make peanut brittle, and they play in the yard, chasing the chickens, climbing the trees. It's a blessing to see life continue, you know? To see that, despite everything, we managed to build something beautiful. Oh, and before I continue, I want to make a special request to those of you watching me now. Tell me here in the comments, from what corner of America are you watching me? From what little town? And what time of day did you find this video from Grandma here? Early morning with breakfast? After lunch, during that rest time? Or in the evening, before bed? I read each comment with love, you see? And I'm so happy to know where you are and when you took time to listen to me. Tell me! Let's make a chain of love here in the comments. And another thing, my loves, if you can, click that like button down there. That helps the video reach more people who need to hear this story. And subscribe to the channel, okay? Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next videos. You can do it now, quickly, I'll wait. Well, but getting back, the story I'm going to tell today is heavy, my children. It's about choices, about the weight of the curses that elders place on us, and about a miracle, not one of those church miracles, but of a heart that chose love instead of hate. It's about my father, and about the 3 most terrifying days of my life, when I didn't know if he was going to protect me or destroy me. I was born right here in Cedar Falls in 1949. Back then, my dears, this was practically virgin wilderness. There was almost nothing here, just a few families of settlers who came to try their luck in the lands of northern Montana. My father, Alfonso Silver, was one of those brave men who believed something could be built here. He had come from Colorado, from a little town called Silver Creek, fleeing drought and lack of work. Along with him came my paternal grandfather, Gideon Silver. Oh, my children, that man made sure everyone used the full family name. He insisted on it, said it was to show that we had lineage, that we weren't just anybody. My father was a good man, soft-hearted, one of those who couldn't say no. He was hard-working, got up before dawn to tend the farm, planted corn, wheat, beans. But he lived in the shadow of Gideon. My grandfather was the type of man who controlled everything and everyone. He was tall, lean, with dark eyes that seemed to see through you. When he spoke, no one answered back. When he commanded, everyone obeyed. And my father, poor father, he never had the courage to stand up to his own father. My mother, Henrietta, was a sweet woman, petite, with black hair always pulled back in a bun. She had come from Arkansas, from a poor family in Little Rock, and had met my father at a county fair when he was passing through trading cattle. They married quickly, and she came here without knowing anyone. Poor thing, my mother suffered so much at my grandfather's hands. He didn't hit her, no, but he humiliated her. Said she was weak, that she didn't know how to do things right, that my father had married poorly. And she would lower her head and continue working, cooking, washing clothes in the creek, taking care of us. I had 2 brothers, William and Theodore. William was 4 years older than me, and Theodore was 3 years younger. We lived in a simple wooden house with a dirt floor, covered with tin roofing. It had only 3 rooms, 1 bedroom where my parents and Theodore slept, another bedroom where William and I slept, and the kitchen, which was also the living room. The stove was wood-burning, and my mother spent all day there, making food, heating water. There was no bathroom inside the house. We had to go to the back of the yard, where there was a little wooden outhouse with a hole in the ground. My childhood was simple, but there was joy, you know. We didn't have store-bought toys, so we made them up. I made dolls from corn husks, dressed them with fabric scraps my mother gave me. William and Theodore made cars from tin cans, and we'd play in the dirt, making roads, pretending we were traveling. When my grandfather wasn't around, we laughed, ran barefoot through the yard, climbed trees. I had a little friend, Clarissa, the neighbor's daughter, who lived about 2 miles from our house. We'd meet on the path to the fields and play Ring Around the Rosie, singing those old songs everyone knew. The routine was always the same. We'd wake up early, still dark, to the sound of the rooster and birds. My mother was already in the kitchen making coffee. We'd have black coffee with cornbread, and when we had it, a piece of corn cake. Then I had to help her wash dishes, sweep the house, fetch water from the well. My father and brothers would go to the fields with grandfather and stay there all day, weeding, planting, harvesting. I'd go sometimes too, especially during harvest time, to help pull corn or pick vegetables. It was hard work, you see. Our hands got calloused, our backs ached, but we didn't complain. Complaining near Gideon meant signing up for punishment. Oh, my grandfather's punishments. When we did something wrong, or when he simply thought we had, he'd get the belt and hit. He'd hit my father, hit my brothers. He never hit me, but the way he looked at me always left me with a strange, different kind of fear. It was like he had plans for me, you understand? He always told my father, "This girl is going to be the jewel of the family. Don't let just anyone get near her." And my father would agree, quietly, always quietly. I must have been about 10, 11 years old when I started noticing that my grandfather looked at me strangely. It wasn't a normal grandfather's look, you know. It was possessive. When I grew up and started becoming a young lady, he became even more controlling. He wouldn't let me talk to boys in town. Once I was playing with Clarissa and her brother, Isaac, and my grandfather suddenly appeared, grabbed my ear and dragged me home. Said I was offering myself, that I'd end up becoming a loose woman. My mother tried to defend me, said I was just a child, but he yelled at her and she went quiet. Life was like that, my dears. Hard work, little joy, and always that tension when Gideon was around. My father wasn't happy, I could see that. He looked at Mother with affection, but could never protect her from grandfather's cruelties. He looked at us, his children, and I saw sadness in his eyes. But he didn't react. He had been raised that way, obeying, accepting, swallowing anger and fear. I remember once, I must have been about 12, when my father tried to oppose Gideon. It was in an argument about selling a cow. My father wanted to sell it to buy medicine for my mother, who had a bad cough that wouldn't go away. Gideon said no, that the cow was worth more than her health, that she'd get better on her own. My father, for the first time, raised his voice. "But she's my wife. I decide." The silence that fell in that kitchen was scary. Gideon got up slowly, walked over to my father, and slapped him so hard it knocked him to the ground, and said, in that cold voice, "You don't decide anything. I own this land, this family, and you. Don't ever forget that." My father got up, wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, and lowered his head. He never opposed his father again. It was in that environment that I grew up, with fear, with forced respect, but also with love for my parents and brothers. We protected each other as best we could. My mother would hug me in secret and say, "One day this will pass, my daughter. One day we'll be free." I didn't quite understand what she meant, but I felt that she also dreamed of a different life. And that's how I spent my childhood, between playing in the yard with Clarissa and Isaac, the days of hard work in the fields, the smell of wet earth when it rained, and the constant fear of Gideon. But when I turned 13, things started to change in a way I never could have imagined. The way my grandfather looked at me became even more intense, and the things he said about me, about my future, started to become stranger and more frightening. I remember like it was yesterday, the day of my 13th birthday. My mother had made cornbread, my favorite, and we had gathered in the kitchen to sing Happy Birthday. It was June 1962. It was freezing cold that night, and we had lit the wood stove to warm the house. My brothers were excited. Clarissa had come with her family, and even my father seemed a little lighter, smiling as he handed me a little gift wrapped in brown paper. It was a wooden comb he had carved himself. But in the middle of the party, my grandfather Gideon entered the kitchen. He hadn't participated in the singing, had stayed in his room, as he always did when he had matters to think about, as he said. When he entered, the mood changed immediately. Everyone went quiet. He walked up to me, looked me up and down in that way that made me freeze, and said, in front of everyone, 13 years old, already becoming a woman. Alfonso, you know what you need to do. This girl can't be running around loose, attracting any bum. From today on, she doesn't go out alone anymore. And you're going to start looking for a marriage for her. But it has to be someone trustworthy, someone from the family. My father swallowed hard and just nodded. My mother squeezed my hand under the table but said nothing. Clarissa and her family were embarrassed and soon left. The party ended there. I went up to my room, lay on my hard wooden bed, and cried quietly so no one would hear. I didn't quite understand what grandfather had meant by someone from the family, but it had sounded wrong, very wrong. In the months that followed, life became suffocating. My grandfather started watching me all the time. I could no longer go play with Clarissa without William coming along to watch me. I could no longer go get water from the well alone. I could no longer go to town on the rare occasions we went to sell flour or buy something. I lived locked in the house, helping my mother with chores, but feeling like the walls were getting tighter and tighter, as if the house had shrunk. And worst of all, my dears, was the way my grandfather talked about me. He started making strange comments in front of everyone, as if it were normal. Things like, "This girl is going to be my daughter-in-law. I've already decided." Or, "Jessica, you're going to marry someone I choose, and it'll be soon, because I won't let you get lost out there." My mother would turn pale when he said these things, but wouldn't open her mouth. My father would look away and change the subject. One day, I had just turned 14. I was by the creek washing clothes with my mother. It was a hot day, the sun was strong, and we were alone, with no one around. That's when my mother, for the first time, spoke about what was happening. She stopped scrubbing clothes, looked at me with tears in her eyes, and said, "My daughter, I need to tell you something. Your grandfather, he has plans for you, plans that aren't from God." I asked what she meant, and she took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. "Your grandfather wants you to marry your father." The words came out of her mouth in a whisper, but it was as if she had shouted. I dropped the clothes in the water, stared at her without being able to blink. "What do you mean, Mother? He's married. He's my father." She held my hands, squeezed tight, and continued. "I know, my daughter. I know it's an abomination. But your grandfather, he's sick in the head. He thinks his bloodline is sacred, that you're a family jewel that can't go outside. He's already planted this idea in your father's head for a long time. And I'm afraid, Jessica, I'm very afraid of what he's capable of doing if your father doesn't obey." I couldn't answer. I stood there, paralyzed, feeling the world collapse around me. The sound of the creek, the singing of birds, everything became muffled, distant. My mother hugged me, and we stayed there, crying together, with the clothes forgotten in the water. At that moment, I understood that my life wasn't mine. That I was property, something that Gideon could decide the fate of. And that my father, poor father, was trapped in that web of obedience that had been woven his whole life. When we returned home, I looked at my father with different eyes. He was sitting on the porch, fixing a hoe, and when he saw me, he quickly looked away. That's when I realized he knew. He knew what grandfather wanted, and he was fighting alone with that inside his head. But how long could he resist? The months passed, and the situation became more and more tense. My grandfather started getting sick. He had a dry cough that wouldn't go away, lost weight, his skin turned yellow. The town doctor who came occasionally said it was liver trouble, that he wouldn't last long. And you know what's scariest, my dears? The sicker he got, the more obsessed he became with me. He would call me to his room and stare at me, as if memorizing every part of me. He'd say things like, "You'll stay in the family. You'll belong to a Silver. I've already arranged everything." There was one day, I was 15, when he called me alone to his room. My heart raced, but I couldn't disobey. I entered slowly, and he was lying in bed, weak, but with that look still burning with determination. He grabbed my hand hard and said, "Jessica, I'm going to die soon, but before I die, I'm going to leave everything right. Your father will take care of you. And you'll be his. That's how it has to be. The family can't mix with strangers. You understand?" I trembled all over, wanted to pull my hand from his grip, but was paralyzed with fear. I could only nod, without saying anything. He let go of my hand and closed his eyes, satisfied, as if he had sealed a pact. I left that room feeling dirty, my children, feeling trapped in a web I didn't know how to escape. I ran to the yard, knelt behind the house, and vomited. I vomited from disgust, from fear, from despair. My mother found me there, helped me up, and took me inside. She didn't need to ask anything. She knew. That night, I heard my parents talking quietly in their room. My room was separated only by a thin wooden wall, so you could hear everything when they spoke a little louder. My mother was pleading, "Alfonso, you can't do this. She's your daughter. She's a child. This is sin. It's crime. It's monstrous." And my father, with that tired voice, full of pain, answered, "You think I don't know, Henrietta. You think I want this. But he's my father. He raised me to obey, and if I don't do what he wants, I don't know what he's capable of doing. He could throw us out of here. He could leave us in misery. He could..." "Could what, Alfonso? Could be worse than destroying your own daughter?" My mother was crying loudly now, and I was also crying on the other side of the wall, silently, biting the sheet so I wouldn't make noise. My father didn't answer, and his silence was the most terrifying thing of all. It was there, that night, that I understood. My father was in a war inside his own head, between the good man he was and the obedient son he had been forced to be his whole life. And I didn't know who was going to win. The winter of 1965 came colder than normal here in Cedar Falls. I had just turned 16, and my grandfather Gideon was dying. The disease had consumed him completely. He who was a big, strong man, who controlled everything and everyone, was now just skin and bones lying in that bed, breathing, wheezing, skin yellow as candle wax. But you know what's scary, my dears? Even dying, even without strength to get up from bed, he still commanded. Still controlled, still had that look of someone who wouldn't leave this world without leaving his mark of fire on all of us. It was an August night, bitterly cold outside, and we knew it was a matter of hours. The town doctor had come in the afternoon and told my father, "Prepare the family. He won't make it through the night." My mother had lit candles in the room, had put a crucifix on the wall, as if that could ward off the evil that hung over that house. My brothers were in the kitchen, quiet, scared, and I was in my room praying, asking God for it to end soon, for that man to leave and take all that curse with him. But then my father knocked on my door. "Jessica, come, he wants to talk to us." My heart almost jumped out of my mouth. I didn't want to enter that room, didn't want to hear anything more from that man. But I had no choice. I never did. I got up, dried my tears, and went. When I entered the room, the smell was suffocating. Smell of sickness, of approaching death. My grandfather was lying there, breathing heavily, eyes sunken, but still shining with that cruel determination. He looked at me, then looked at my father, who was on the other side of the bed. And then, with a hoarse, weak voice, but loaded with poison, he began to speak. "Alfonso, my son." He coughed, put his hand to his chest, but continued. "I'm leaving. But before I go, I need to leave things right. I leave you everything. This land, this house, everything I built. But you have an obligation, a sacred obligation." My father was pale, sweating cold, hands trembling. He knew what was coming. I knew what was coming, and we couldn't move, as if we were trapped in an invisible web. "This girl here," he pointed at me with his trembling finger, and I felt my whole body freeze. "This girl is the future of our lineage. She can't go outside. Can't marry just anyone. You will honor our family, Alfonso. You will marry her." The words fell in the room like stones. I felt my legs go weak, had to hold on to the wall not to fall. My father closed his eyes, took a deep breath, but said nothing. "And if she refuses," grandfather continued, and what came next was the most horrible thing I ever heard in my life. "If she refuses, you do what has to be done. You take her by force, as many times as necessary, until she accepts. Until she understands that her place is here, with you, continuing the blood of the Silvers. Do you hear me, Alfonso? Do you promise me?" My father opened his eyes, looked at his father, and I saw tears running down his face. Silent tears of a destroyed man. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Grandfather insisted stronger. "Do you promise me?" And then, my dears, in a low, broken voice, my father said, I promise." That tore me apart inside. I pretended I hadn't heard. Pretended that wasn't happening. I stood there, standing, looking at the wall, feeling the ground disappear under my feet. My grandfather gave a long sigh, satisfied, as if he had fulfilled his last mission on this earth. He closed his eyes, his breathing became weaker, and a few minutes later, he died. The silence that remained in that room was deafening. My father got up, left without looking at me, and I stayed there alone with the still warm body of the man who had just condemned me. You know what I felt at that moment? Nothing. I became completely empty, as if my soul had been ripped out from inside me. The funeral was the next day. We didn't have a cemetery nearby, so we buried him right there, in a corner of the property, under a big tree. Some neighbors came, people from town, but it was all quick. Nobody cried much. I think everyone knew that Gideon wasn't a man who deserved tears. After everyone left, the house was in deadly silence. My mother had red eyes from crying so much, but it wasn't for Gideon. No, it was for me. It was for what she knew was coming. My brothers were quiet, each in their own corner, not quite understanding what was happening. And my father, oh, my father. He disappeared. Physically, he was there, sitting on the porch or walking around the farm, but he wasn't present. He didn't talk, didn't look anyone in the eyes. It was as if he had died along with Gideon, and what remained was just an empty body, a shell. A day passed. I locked myself in my room, pushed the chair against the doorknob, and stayed there, praying, shaking, waiting for the moment when he would come for me, waiting for the moment when he would fulfill the promise he had made to his father. But he didn't come. The second day passed. I barely ate. My mother knocked on the door, left a plate of food, but I couldn't swallow anything. My stomach was churning with fear. At night, I heard his footsteps around the house. Slow, heavy steps, like someone carrying the world on their shoulders. He would stop in front of my room door. I would hold my breath. My heart beat so loud I was sure he could hear it from the other side. But he didn't enter. He would stand there for a few minutes and then leave. On the third day, I woke up with my body aching from tension, my mind exhausted from so much fear. I couldn't stand being locked up anymore. I needed water. I needed air. I went down to the kitchen early in the morning, before sunrise, thinking no one would be there. But he was. Sitting at the table, with a cup of cold coffee in front of him, staring at the wall. When he saw me, he raised his eyes. And for the first time in 3 days, we really looked at each other. His look was of a destroyed man. A man who had fought a war inside his own soul and still didn't know who had won. He didn't smile, didn't speak, just looked at me with those deep, tired eyes full of pain. And I looked at him, my father, the man who raised me, who taught me to plant, who carved a wooden comb for my birthday. And I wondered, was he still in there? Or had Gideon won, and what remained was just obedience and evil? I stood there, paralyzed, holding the hem of my dress, trembling. He slowly got up from the chair. My heart raced. He started walking toward me. Each step of his was a hammer hitting my chest. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. He stopped in front of me, stood there, looking down at me, and I closed my eyes, preparing for the worst. But what happened? My dears, what happened at that moment I will never forget. He stood there in front of me, so close I could hear his breathing. Heavy, tremulous, irregular. Each breath of his seemed like thunder in that silent kitchen. I still had my eyes closed, squeezed so tight it hurt, my whole body tense like a rope about to snap, every muscle contracted, every nerve on maximum alert, waiting for him to do what Gideon had ordered, waiting for those hands of his, those hands calloused from so much farm work, to grab me violently, waiting for him to drag me by the hair to the room, waiting for him to transform me into what grandfather had decided I should be, property, an object without will, a piece of flesh to perpetuate the cursed bloodline of the Silvers. My heart beat so hard, so desperately hard, it seemed like it would explode inside my chest, that it would tear through my ribs and jump out. I felt the metallic taste of blood in my mouth from biting my tongue so hard not to scream, not to beg, not to collapse right there. My nails were dug so deep into my palms that I felt the skin breaking, felt the warm moisture of blood flowing between my fingers. But the physical pain was nothing, my dears, absolutely nothing compared to the terror consuming my soul at that moment. I prayed quietly, desperately, without moving my lips, trying to cling to God as if he were the last life raft in the middle of a raging ocean. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come. But the words got tangled in my head, mixed up, got lost. I couldn't think straight, couldn't form a complete thought. I could only feel the terror, that cold, visceral terror that slowly rises up your legs like freezing water, crosses your belly leaving a horrible emptiness, squeezes your chest until all the air is gone, rises up your throat until you almost suffocate, and paralyzes absolutely everything. His footsteps had stopped. He was there, right in front of me, just inches away. I could feel the heat of his body radiating toward me, could smell him, sweat, earth, and something else, something of despair that emanated from his pores, could hear his increasingly labored breathing, increasingly heavy as if he were drowning in air. And then came a sound I will never, ever forget until the last second of the last day of my life. It wasn't a scream of rage. It wasn't a sharp command. It wasn't the sound of someone about to commit a monstrosity. It was a moan. A low, muffled, strangled moan of pure pain, soul pain. Pain so deep it comes from a place we didn't even know existed inside us. My father began to sob. And it wasn't ordinary crying, my dears. It wasn't that crying of someone who's sad. It was the crying of a shattered man. It was the sound of a soul tearing in half, splintering into 1,000 pieces. It was the choked, desperate animal crying of someone who had held on too long, who had carried an impossible weight for too long, and finally couldn't take it for one more second, not one more thousandth of a second. I slowly opened my eyes, very afraid of what I would see, prepared for the worst. And what I saw, my children, my loves, what I saw was the most devastating, most brutal, most redemptive scene of my entire life. My father, that man who had been crushed, squeezed, annihilated by a tyrant for 40 years, that man I had spent 3 days and 3 nights fearing as one fears a demon, was falling. Not slowly, not with control. He collapsed. His knees bent all at once, as if all the strength, all the bones, all the structure that kept him standing had simply disappeared, evaporated. He fell to the wooden kitchen floor with a dull, heavy, violent thud, like a tree cut at the root that finally topples. He grabbed the hem of my dress with both hands, gripped so tightly I felt the fabric strain, almost tear. His hands shook violently. His fingers dug into the fabric like desperate claws. He pressed his forehead to my legs, there at the height of my knees, and began to cry in a way that shattered my heart into 1,000 pieces. His whole body trembled, shook as if he had a very high fever. His shoulders rose and fell violently with each sob. I could feel his tears wetting my dress, soaking the fabric, warm, abundant, desperate. And between the crying, between the deep moans of pain, between the sobs that tore the air from his lungs, he repeated, like a litany, like a plea, like a prayer, "Forgive me, my daughter, forgive me, my sweet child, forgive me, please, for the love of God, forgive me." I stood there, paralyzed, petrified, trembling from head to toe, unable to move even an inch. My legs were completely weak, without any strength. My heart that had been racing with pure terror was now tight, compressed with something else, pain, relief, confusion, love, fear, all mixed in a whirlwind of emotions I couldn't separate, couldn't name. My hands floated in the air, trembling, not knowing whether they should touch him or run away. Was it true? Was it real? Wasn't it a cruel trap? Wouldn't he suddenly pull me, knock me to the ground and... But no. He just cried. Cried and cried, clinging to my legs as if I were the only life raft in the middle of a stormy ocean, as if I were the last thing preventing him from completely sinking into darkness. "Forgive me for him," he managed to say between sobs, his voice completely broken, torn, unrecognizable. "Forgive me for the monster who raised me. Forgive me for the demon who created me and molded me in his image. Forgive me for every day, every damn day, every second of every day that I was too weak, too cowardly to face that man. Forgive me for letting him control our lives, destroy this family, poison absolutely everything good and pure we had in this house. He slowly raised his face, and when our eyes finally met, I saw a man completely, totally, irreversibly destroyed. His eyes were red, swollen. It looked like there was blood mixed with tears. His face was completely wet, soaked with tears and sweat that flowed non-stop. His mouth trembled, his chin trembled. He looked 10, 15 years older than he had seemed just 3 days ago. He looked like a man who had crossed hell, had visited the darkest places of human existence, and had returned forever marked, burned by the experience, transformed by pain. "I am a coward, Jessica," he said, and his voice came out in a hoarse, strangled whisper, loaded with shame so deep, so visceral it was almost palpable. A miserable, despicable coward who never, ever had the courage to protect you, to protect your mother, to protect this family that God gave me. I saw him humiliate your mother for 20 years, 20 whole years, and did nothing. Just lowered my head, just swallowed it, just accepted it. I saw him look at you that disgusting, sick way when you were still a little girl, and did nothing, said nothing, didn't protect you. He took a deep breath, a moan coming out with the air. And when he was dying, when he was in that bed stinking of death, when he gave me that order, that cursed, filthy, rotten, sick order straight from hell, I promised. Tears flowed faster now. I promised him, Jessica. I looked into that demon's eyes and promised I would. That I would do that to you. To my own daughter. To my little girl. He started hitting his closed fist against his own chest, hard, repeatedly, as if he wanted to punish himself, as if he wanted to tear the rotten heart out of his body. I promised! I promised! The scream came torn from his throat. And in these 3 days of hell on earth, I fought a war inside my head. A bloody war between the obedient son that man forced me to be for 40 years and the father I desperately want to be. That I need to be. That I have the obligation to be. He held my face with both hands, with delicacy, with reverence, with such care as if I were made of porcelain, as if I were the most precious, most fragile, most sacred thing in the entire universe. His hands trembled so much I felt the vibration on my face. Every night, my daughter, every night of these 3 days I went to your door. Every night I stood there on the other side, leaning against the wood, with my hand on the doorknob, listening to you crying softly, trying to muffle the crying in the pillow so no one would hear. New tears sprouted in his eyes. And every night I felt his voice in my head, hammering, hammering, non-stop, commanding, ordering, demanding that I fulfill the promise. You promised, Alfonso. You gave your word. Honor your word. Honor your father. Honor the lineage. Enter that room and do what has to be done. She's yours now. She belongs to you. She's family property. Use her. Break her. Make her obey. His voice was so real, so strong, as if he were still alive, as if he were whispering in my ear. He squeezed my face tighter, not to hurt, but as if he needed to feel that I was real. And I stood there, with my hand on the doorknob, gripping, almost turning, trembling all over, fighting against myself, hating myself with every fiber of my being. Thinking, if I enter that room, if I open this door, if I do what he ordered, I lose my daughter forever. I lose my soul forever. I become exactly what I most hate, most despise, most fear in the entire world. I become him. I become Gideon. His voice was getting firmer now, more determined, as if speaking it out loud was giving him strength. But his voice was so strong, Jessica, so powerful. 40 years of obedience. 40 years being conditioned, being molded, being broken and remolded in his image. 40 years getting beaten when I disobeyed. 40 years hearing that I was nothing, that I was worth nothing, that my only function was to obey, obey, obey. These things don't disappear in 3 days. Don't disappear easily. He closed his eyes for a moment, took a deep breath, as if gathering all the courage that still existed within him. When he opened his eyes again, there was something different there. A determination. A clarity. But then, this morning, when I came down and saw you entering the kitchen, when I saw the absolute terror on your face, the way you trembled like a leaf in a storm, the way you looked at me, not like a daughter looks at her father, but like prey looks at a predator, like a little lamb looks at a wolf. You looked at me as if I were him, as if I were Gideon. His voice broke again, more tears flowing. And at that moment, at that exact moment, something inside me died. And it wasn't the good man who still existed inside me. It was the obedient son. It was the slave. It was the chain that tied me to that monster even after he had died. I felt it breaking inside my chest, felt the prison opening, and I decided, enough, it's over, no more, never again. He pulled my face closer, touched his forehead to mine, and looked deep, deeply into my eyes. I will never, never, never touch you that way, he said, and each word came loaded with absolute conviction. I'd rather die 1,000 times. I'd rather be tortured. I'd rather lose this land he left, lose this house, lose every piece of cursed inheritance that man accumulated. I'd rather live under a bridge, begging for food, being cold and hungry, than lay a finger on you with bad intentions. He sobbed again, but now it was different. It wasn't just pain. It was also liberation. You are my daughter. My little girl, my child, the most sacred, most pure, most precious, most important thing that exists in my life. You came from me, but you don't belong to me. You don't belong to anyone. You are a human being, a person, with your own will, with your own dreams, with the right to choose your own path. His words began to come out faster now, as if he had kept this for so long that now he needed to get it all out at once. You know what I thought, on the second night, when I was standing at your door? I remembered when you were born. Remember I told you I was so happy when I found out it was a girl? Remember? Your grandfather got angry, said girls were useless, that girls were weakness. But I was happy, because I looked at you, so tiny, so fragile, wrapped in that little cloth, and I thought, this child is going to have a different life from mine. I'm going to protect her. I'm going to make her grow up free, happy, without fear. That was my first thought when I held you in my arms for the first time. He smiled through the tears, a sad but genuine smile. You were so tiny, Jessica. You fit completely in the palms of my hands. And you looked at me with those little eyes, and I swore to myself, swore to God, that I would do everything to see you grow up happy. And I failed. I failed miserably. I let that man imprison you. I let that man look at you with those disgusting eyes. I let that man plant this rotten seed of future he had imagined for you. He squeezed my face more tenderly. But I won't fail anymore. It's over. From today, from this moment, you are free. Free to marry whoever you want, whenever you want, if you want. Free to never marry if you don't want to. Free to go wherever you dream of going. Free to study, to work, to do what your heart tells you. I will work the rest of my life to give you that freedom, to give you the opportunities I never had. He kissed my forehead with infinite delicacy. I'm going to spend the rest of my days trying to make up for the fear I caused you in these last years, trying to erase from your memory those 3 horrible days, trying to show you that I am your father, your real father, not the monster Gideon wanted me to be. And if you can never completely forgive me, I'll understand. I'll respect it. Because you have every right not to forgive me. Every right. At that moment, my dears, at that exact moment, something inside me finally broke. All the terror of the last 3 days, all the accumulated fear of the last years, all the anguish, all the pain, everything came out of me in desperate, violent, liberating crying. I threw myself into his arms, held on to him with all the strength I had, and cried. I cried like I had never cried in my life. Cried until I had no more tears. Cried until my throat hurt. Cried until my whole body hurt. And he hugged me. Hugged me tight, so tight I could barely breathe, but I didn't care. He pressed me against his chest, one hand on my head, the other on my back, and cried with me. We completely collapsed there on the cold floor of that kitchen, embraced, crying, trembling, letting absolutely everything out, all the pain, all the trauma, all the horror of the last years. It was as if we had kept an ocean of tears inside us, and finally, the dam had burst. My little girl, he whispered between sobs, stroking my hair. My beloved daughter, my precious child. I love you so much. And I'm so sorry for everything. I forgive you, Daddy. I managed to say through tears, my voice coming out strangled. I forgive you. I forgive you. We stayed there. I don't know how long. Could have been 5 minutes, could have been an hour, could have been an eternity. Time had stopped existing. There was only us there, father and daughter, healing together, saving each other together, being reborn together from the ashes of that nightmare. That's when I heard hurried, desperate footsteps coming from the hallway. My mother had woken up. She had heard the screams, had heard the crying echoing through the entire house. She appeared at the kitchen door, barefoot, in her nightgown, with her long hair loose and messy, eyes wide with fear and hope and terror and relief, all at the same time. When she saw us there, embraced on the floor crying, she stopped, covered her mouth with both hands, and understood. She understood everything instantly. Alfonso. Her voice came out in a tremulous whisper, loaded with emotion. Alfonso. You. My father looked at her over my head, eyes still full of tears, but there was something new there. There was liberation, there was peace, there was determination. I chose them, Henrietta, he said, his voice hoarse but firm. I chose my daughter. I chose my wife. I chose my real family. I chose love. I chose life. And damn Gideon. Damn everything he represented. Damn the cursed land, the cursed inheritance, the cursed lineage. We're going to live free. We're going to live in peace. We're going to live with dignity, finally free. My mother covered her face with her hands and started crying. It wasn't crying of sadness. It was crying of relief so deep, so immense, that it came out in violent sobs. She had carried this fear, this anguish, for so long. She had suffered so much at that man's hands. And now, finally, it was over. She ran to us, knelt on the floor, and joined the hug. And there, the three of us, the family that had survived hell, we stayed embraced on the floor of that kitchen, crying tears of pain, but also of liberation, of relief, of hope, of new beginnings, of new life. The monster had died. The chain had been broken, and the family had survived, hurt, marked, but alive, and finally free. The days that followed that liberating morning were days of rebirth, my dears. It was as if the entire house had awakened from a nightmare that lasted decades. The air became lighter, the walls seemed brighter, even the birds outside sang differently. Or maybe it was just us who could finally hear their song without that horrible weight in our chests. The first thing my father did, on the same day as that liberating morning, was drag the bed where Gideon had died out of the house. He called my brothers, William and Theodore, and the three of them together carried that old bed, that cursed bed where so many cruel orders had been given, and took it to the middle of the property. My father got kerosene, poured it on all that wood, struck a match, and set it on fire. My mother and I stayed on the porch, watching. The flames rose high, orange, red, crackling, devouring every piece of that bed. And you know what I felt, my children? Relief. Such great relief that I started crying again, but this time it wasn't crying of pain. It was crying of liberation. My mother held my hand, squeezed tight, and we stayed there watching the fire consume the last physical symbol of Gideon's tyranny. "It's over," my father said, looking at the flames. "It's really over." In the days that followed, he burned more things. He burned the old papers that grandfather kept in a wooden box, papers scribbled with those crazy ideas about pure lineage, about family blood, about how the Silvers were superior to others. My father read some of those papers out loud before throwing them in the fire, and it was scary, my dears. It was the mind of a completely sick man, obsessed, who had turned the family into a prison. "This isn't inheritance," my father said, throwing the papers into the flames. "This is poison. And poison we don't pass on. We destroy it." After that, we did a complete cleaning of the house. We washed every corner, every wall, scrubbed the floor until our knees hurt. My mother opened all the windows and let the wind in. Take away that smell of sickness, of death, of evil that seemed to have permeated the wood. We sang while we cleaned. We sang hymns, sang old songs my mother knew. And for the first time in years, the house had sounds of joy. My father changed completely. He who had always been so quiet, so bent under the weight of obedience, began to talk more, to smile, to joke. He began to treat my mother as she deserved, with respect, with affection, with love. He asked her opinion about everything, about what to plant, about what to sell, about plans for the family. They talked as equals, and my mother flourished. She who had been so erased, so small in Gideon's presence, began to shine. And with me. Oh, my children, with me he was wonderful. He went back to being the father I remembered from my very early childhood, before grandfather's control became unbearable. He taught me things. He took me along when he went to work. He introduced me to neighbors with pride. "This here is my daughter Jessica, a smart, hard-working girl who will go far in life." And he made a point of saying this in front of everyone, as if he wanted to announce to the world that I wasn't property, that I was a person of my own value. About 2 weeks after that morning, he did something that marked me deeply. He built a new wooden chair, very beautiful, with a high back and padded seat that my mother had sewn. He called everyone, me, my mother, my brothers, and placed the chair on the porch in the best spot where the morning sun hit and afternoon shade fell. "This chair is Jessica's," he announced. "It's her place, and no one sits here without her permission, because in this house her will matters. Her space is respected, and she will never again have to ask permission to exist." I broke down crying, my dears. I broke down, because that was more than a chair. It was a symbol. It was my father telling the world, and especially me, that I had value, that I had rights, that I had a place that was mine and that no one could invade. I sat in that chair, still crying, and my father knelt in front of me, held my hands, and said, "You are free, Jessica. Free to marry whoever you choose, whenever you want, if you want. Free to say no, free to say yes, free to dream. I will work every day of my life to ensure you have real choices, not choices someone imposes. Do you hear me? You own your life, not me, not your mother, not anyone, you." Those words, my children, those words healed me in a way I can't explain. It was as if he had removed the chains Gideon had put on me and had given me wings instead. The months passed, and life returned to normal, but a new normal, beautiful, healthy. I went back to leaving the house without fear, went back to visiting Clarissa, went back to going to town. And for the first time in my life, I began to dream about the future, not with terror, but with hope. It was on one of those days in town, I was 17 already, that I met Ronald. He was a young man from a settler family that had established itself not far from us, towards the Helena area, a neighboring region. He had come to Cedar Falls to sell grain and ended up stopping at the same store where I was with my father. Ronald was different from other young men. He was polite, respectful, hardworking. He had kind eyes and a calm smile. We started talking, just town talk, about farming, about the weather, about nothing much. But there was something about him that caught my attention, a genuine kindness. When we were leaving, my father noticed I had looked at Ronald. And you know what he did? He smiled. Smiled at me in that complicit way and said quietly, "Seems like a good young man. If you want to get to know him better, I have nothing against it. But only if you want. The choice is yours." The choice is yours. Those 3 words were so new, so strange, so wonderful that I almost couldn't believe they were real. For the first time in my life, someone was giving me permission to choose. No, more than permission, was reminding me that the power to choose had always been mine. It had just been stolen for a long time. Ronald started appearing more in town, and we started talking more. He told me about his life, about his dreams of having bigger land, of building a good and healthy family. And I found myself telling him about my dreams too. Simple dreams, of having a house full of peace, of raising children in freedom, of living without fear. It took a year for him to ask my father for my hand in marriage. And when he asked, my father called me alone to the room and said, "Ronald asked me for your hand, but I won't decide anything. Do you want to marry him?" I thought, really thought. I looked deep into my heart, and the answer was there, clear as river water. Yes, I wanted to. Not because someone was forcing me, not because it was what was expected of me, but because I had chosen, because I loved that gentle man who treated me with respect, because I wanted to build a life with him. "I want to, Daddy," I said. "I choose him." My father hugged me tight and whispered in my ear, "Then you have my blessing. And more importantly, you have my joy, because you chose for yourself, and that's all I ever wanted for you." I married Ronald in 1967 in a simple ceremony at the little church in Cedar Falls. My father walked me to the altar, and when he placed my hand in Ronald's hand, he had tears in his eyes. Tears of happiness, because he knew, and I knew, that this wasn't an arranged marriage, it wasn't an imposition, it wasn't a prison, it was a free choice. It was true love, it was freedom. And that's how, my dears, the turnaround happened in my life. It wasn't a divine miracle that fell from heaven. It was the courageous choice of a man who decided to break chains. It was the love of a father who chose his daughter instead of obedience. It was the liberation that comes when we finally decide enough is enough, that we won't live trapped in the past anymore, that we'll build a new future, even if it's difficult. Life with Ronald was good from the beginning. We built our own little house, not far from my parents' house. And for the first time, I lived without fear. I lived with love. I lived free. And here I am today, my dears, at 76 years old, living here in Cedar Falls, the same little town where I was born, where I suffered, where I was liberated, and where I built my life. This land that was once the stage of so much suffering transformed into my real home, the place where I put down roots of love and peace. My Ronald is here with me to this day, thank God. It's been 58 years of marriage, 58 years of companionship, respect, true love. He's a good man, my children, always has been. Never raised his voice to me, never made me feel less, never tried to control me. He gave me what I most needed after everything I went through: security, freedom, and love. We had 3 children, Marcus, Lucy, and little Paul. I raised them completely differently from the way I was raised. I raised them with love, with freedom, with respect. Never raised my hand to any of them. Never yelled the way Gideon yelled. Never imposed anything. I let them choose their paths, their loves, their lives. And today they're wonderful adults, each with their own family, each happy in their own way. And the grandchildren. Oh, my dears, the 6 grandchildren are the joy of my life. When they come here to the house, and they come often, every week there's someone here, the house becomes a party. They run through the yard, play with the chickens, climb trees, fill the kitchen with mess. And I sit here on my porch doing my crocheting, looking at them, and thank God for every second of this life I have today. Crocheting became my therapy, my refuge, my peace. I wake up early every day, make my coffee filtered through that cloth filter that's a family tradition, and go to my porch with the yarn and needle. I make table runners, make placemats, even make little clothes for the grandchildren. I sell some pieces at the town farmer's market, but it's not for the money, no. It's because it feels good to create beautiful things with these hands that once trembled so much with fear. My father lived to be 73. He died in peace in 1995, surrounded by family, knowing he had fixed what needed to be fixed. Before leaving, he called me alone, held my hand and said, "I die happy because you are free, because you are happy, because I managed to break that cursed chain." And I said to him, "You saved me, Daddy. You gave me life twice, once when I was born, and another when you chose to protect me." He died with a smile on his face. My mother lived longer, to 81. She saw all the grandchildren grow up, saw the family happy, saw that the nightmare had truly ended. When she passed in 2003, I held her hand and thanked her for protecting me as she could, for being my safe harbor during the difficult years. Today, when I look back, it still hurts my children. I won't lie. The scars are here. The nightmares still come sometimes, but the pain doesn't control me anymore. The past doesn't define me anymore. I am more than that terrified girl locked in her room. I am the woman who survived, who rebuilt, who created a beautiful family on top of the ruins of trauma. And you know what I discovered in all these years? That the real miracle doesn't happen from heaven, like magic. The real miracle happens when a human being, even broken, even destroyed, chooses love instead of hate. Chooses to protect instead of destroy. Chooses to break the cycle instead of perpetuating evil. My father could have destroyed me that morning, could have fulfilled Gideon's order, could have transformed into the monster. But he chose differently, and that choice saved not only me, but our entire lineage. My children grew up free because my father chose to liberate me. My grandchildren play happily because the chain was broken. Sometimes I sit here on the porch, watching the sun rise over Cedar Falls, and think about everything I went through. And I give thanks. I give thanks for having survived. I give thanks for my father's courage. I give thanks for Ronald's love. I give thanks for the beautiful family I built. I give thanks for every day of peace I have today. Life is good now, my dears. Simple, but good. And after everything I went through, simplicity with peace is worth more than any wealth in the world. My dears, my loves, if there's someone out there watching who is going through something similar, who is trapped in a cycle of abuse, control, evil within their own family, I want to say something to you. You are not alone. And you don't deserve this. No one in this world deserves to live in fear inside their own home. I learned that evil perpetuates when we stay silent, when we accept, when we think there's no way out, that it's always been this way, that it has to be this way. But it doesn't, my child. It doesn't. The chain can be broken. The cycle can be interrupted. Freedom can be conquered. If you are suffering at the hands of someone in your family, seek help. Talk to someone you trust. Look for the authorities in your country, the organizations that exist to protect people. In every place in the world, there are good people wanting to help. Don't be ashamed. Don't be afraid to report. Shame and fear are the tools that abusers use to keep us trapped. And if you are a father, if you are a mother, if you have children under your responsibility, I beg you, Protect them with your life. No matter what your parents did to you, no matter how you were raised, you can choose differently. You can break the cycle. You can be the miracle in your children's lives, just as my father was the miracle in mine. There is no lineage, no tradition, no obedience that justifies destroying a child. There isn't. Your children are not your property. They are human beings with their own will, with their own dreams, with the right to freedom and dignity. I went through hell, my dears, but I came out the other side. I came out hurt. I came out marked, but I came out alive. And I built a beautiful life, a life worth living, a free life. And if I could do it, you can too. Don't give up. Don't accept that evil wins. Fight, report, seek help. You deserve to be happy. You deserve to be free. And for you who made it this far, who listened to this grandmother's story, I want to make a special request. Subscribe to this channel. Hit the notification bell, because stories like mine need to be told, need to be heard, need to serve as warning, hope, strength for those who are suffering now. And leave me a comment down there with the word freedom, just that word. So I know you watched to the end, that you heard my story, and that you understood the message. Freedom. That's the most beautiful word in the world, my children, and everyone deserves it. Do it now. Don't wait another minute. Subscribe, turn on notifications, and comment freedom. Because together, as a global community, we can make a difference in the lives of those who suffer. May God bless you. May God protect you. And may freedom, true freedom, come into the life of every person who needs it. A kiss to the heart of each one. Until the next story. On the day of my mother's funeral, my own father took me behind the chapel and said, "Now you're going to take her place. Turn around." That's when I discovered he wasn't a widower. He was a murderer. Hi, my dear ones, my sweethearts. How are you all doing? I'm Grandma Sandra. I'm 78 years old, and I live here in the Eastwood neighborhood, right here in Birmingham, Alabama. I was born in a small town called Clarksville, a little place in the countryside that you might know, but nowadays it's here in the city where I make my life. You know, this morning I was here in my kitchen doing my favorite pastime, preparing fresh biscuits to sell at the little park in the neighborhood. See, my children, after I retired, I discovered I had a real talent for making biscuits. I started this almost by accident, you know? I had some neighbors who always asked me to make them when they came to visit, and then a neighbor, Mrs. Ruth, who lives on the corner, said, "Sandra, why don't you start selling these biscuits? They're the best I've ever tasted in my life." And that's how it started. Today I wake up early, around 5 in the morning, sift the flour I buy at Joe's Market, season them with that sharp cheddar cheese, and make about 20-30 biscuits a day. I sell them right there in the park, under the shade of an oak tree. People already know me. They know that every morning Grandma Sandra is there with her warm little biscuits. My home is quite simple, you know? It's a small house, but tidy. I have my potted plants on the porch, some ferns that I love to water in the evening, some petunias that look spectacular when they're in bloom. My grandson, Junior, my youngest daughter's son, comes here often after school to do his homework with me. He's 12 years old and smart as a whip. He always asks me about the old stories, wants to know what life was like in my time. And speaking of that, my dear ones, before you click that red like button and subscribe here to the channel, which makes me very happy when you do that, you know, I wanted to make a special request. Tell me here in the comments, from which corner of the United States are you watching me? And what time is it where you are? Are you watching this, Grandma, in the morning with your coffee, after lunch resting, or in the evening before bed? I always read all the comments and get emotional knowing that there are people from all over listening to this old lady here. Tell me, I want to know where all this love comes from. Let's make a chain of love throughout the entire country. You know, my children, today I wanted to tell you a story that I've carried in my chest for many, many years. It's a heavy story, one that touches the heart, but it's important to tell. It's about something that happened to me when I was very young, back in Clarksville, in rural Alabama. A story about family, about secrets that we sometimes keep, and about how sometimes the people who should protect us are precisely the ones who hurt us the most. It's one of those stories that takes courage to tell, you know? But I think this way. If my story can help one person who's going through something similar, if it can open someone's eyes or give strength to those who need it, then it's worth sharing with you. So grab your coffee, settle into your chair, and come with me on this journey. I'm going to take you back to Clarksville in the 1960s, when I was a girl who thought she knew her father, who thought she knew her family. But life, my dear ones, sometimes teaches us very painful truths about the people we love most. Oh, my dear ones, when I close my eyes and think about my childhood in Clarksville, it seems like it was yesterday, and at the same time, it seems like it was a lifetime ago. I was born in 1946, in a very simple wooden house, on a dirt road near the Baptist church, there in the center of town. In those days, Clarksville was very small, everyone knew each other, and families were large, very different from today. My father's name was Robert, but everyone in town called him Bob. He was a tall, strong man, tanned from the sun, always very serious. He worked as a ranch hand on a large farm a few miles outside of town. He left home before sunrise, riding his chestnut horse, and only came back when it was getting dark. When he came home, he always came tired, with those clothes smelling of leather and sweat, his boots dusty from the road. My mother, poor thing, was named Elizabeth. She was a small woman, very petite, with green eyes that sparkled when she smiled. She took care of the house and us, the children. There were 4 of us, me, who was the oldest, then came my brother William, who was 2 years younger than me, Francis, whom we called Franny, and the baby Thomas, who was almost 10 years younger than me. Our house was small, but my mother made it seem cozy. It only had 3 rooms, the living room in the front, which was where the wooden table we ate at was, my parents' bedroom, and another small room where I slept with Franny in one bed, and the boys slept in bunk beds against the wall. The kitchen was outside, under a tin roof, with a wood stove that my mother lit every day early to make coffee. I remember waking up to the smell of coffee mixed with burning wood and the sound of my mother's pans preparing breakfast. It was always the same thing: strong black coffee, biscuits, or grits with fresh milk that the neighbor, Mrs. Wilson, brought us every morning. My father ate quickly, always in silence, grabbed his leather hat, and left for work. In those days in Clarksville, children played in the street. My siblings and I, along with the neighborhood kids, spent all day out there. We played tag, hide and seek, hopscotch that we drew on the ground with pieces of chalk. The boys flew kites made of colored tissue paper that our mothers saved from birthday parties. I loved playing house with Franny, making pretend meals with leaves and pebbles. When it rained, and boy, in Alabama the rain was a party because it could go months without a drop falling, we'd run into the street to take a rain shower. My mother would yell from the door, "Sandra, bring that girl inside before she catches a cold." But she herself liked to see us happy, you know. Sometimes she'd even smile seeing our joy. My mother was very affectionate, always had a caress, a little kiss, a pat on our heads. She knew how to make some papaya candies that were delicious, and whenever she had money saved up, she'd buy us some colored sugar lollipops at Mr. Charlie's store. It was our greatest joy. But with my father, oh, how things were different. He was very quiet, very somber. When he came home from work, the whole house fell silent. We couldn't make noise, couldn't run through the house. He'd sit in the wooden chair in the living room and stay there quiet, just staring at the wall. My mother served his dinner in silence too, always very careful not to make noise with the plates. I remember we were afraid of him, you know. It wasn't a fear of getting beaten, because back then, he didn't hit us, no. But it was a fear of him getting angry, of him yelling. Because when he yelled, oh, the whole house trembled. His voice was strong, thick, and when he was irritated, everyone stayed as quiet as a mouse. My mother always told us, "You obey your father, you hear? Don't make him nervous because he works so hard to support you." And we really obeyed. When he arrived, we'd run inside the house and stay quiet until bedtime. But there was something I noticed and didn't quite understand back then. Sometimes, when my father came home, my mother had bruises on her arm or a purple mark on her face that she said she got from falling or hitting the door. She always had an explanation, you know. "Oh, Sandra, your mother is clumsy. I tripped on a rock in the yard." Or, "I hit my arm on the corner of the table by accident." I was a child and believed it, right? I thought my mother was really kind of accident-prone. But there was something in the way she spoke, a sadness in her eyes, that I couldn't understand. She'd be quieter on those days, wouldn't hum while doing housework like she used to. And my father, on those days, was even more frowning than normal. Sometimes I'd see him looking at my mother in a strange way, as if he was angry at her for something she had done. But I didn't know what. That's how I grew up in Clarksville, between playing on the dusty street, my mother's affection, and the respectful fear of my father. It was a simple life, a rural family life, where men commanded and women obeyed, where children didn't question adults, and where some secrets were kept behind closed doors. I had no idea that those small signs, those purple marks, that sadness in my mother's eyes, were just the beginning of a much darker truth that I would only discover years later, when it was no longer time to save her. My dear ones, it was when I turned 15 in 1961 that things in our house began to change in a way that shook everything I knew about my family. Until then, I lived in that little child's world, playing in the street, helping my mother with household chores, without really understanding what happened behind closed doors when we weren't watching. I remember as if it were today, the day of my 15th birthday. My mother had made a cornbread cake, my favorite, and had invited some neighbors to celebrate with me. It was a Saturday. My father hadn't gone to work because the boss had given the ranch hands the day off. I was so happy, you know. 15 was an important age for us back then. It meant I was already becoming a young lady. The neighbors brought some simple gifts, a wooden comb, a piece of scented soap, some colored hair ribbons. Mrs. Wilson brought a glass of fresh milk from her cow to go with the cake. Everything was so cheerful, with the women talking in our small living room, laughing at the stories they told each other. That's when my father appeared at the door. He had gone to Mr. Charlie's store to buy some cigarettes, but when he came back and saw all that commotion in the house, his face completely changed. He got frowning, with that dismissive face I already knew well. "What's all this racket in here?" he asked with his thick voice, standing at the living room door. "Sounds like a rich folks' party, so much noise." My mother quickly got up from the chair where she was sitting and went to him, kind of nervous. "It's Sandra's birthday, Bob, 15 years old. I just called the neighbors over for some coffee and a piece of cake." I saw him look at her in a way I had never seen before. It was a hard, cold look, as if she had done something very wrong. The neighbors all went quiet at once, feeling the heavy atmosphere that descended on the room. "Party for what?" he said, taking his hat off his head and throwing it on the table, right in the middle of the little plates with cake. 15 isn't the age for parties, it's the age to work. And you there wasting the household money on foolishness. Mrs. Wilson, who was a brave lady, tried to smooth things over. "Oh, Bob, it's just a simple little cake." Elizabeth made it with the cornmeal left over from last week. But he cut her off mid-sentence. "Mrs. Wilson, you take care of your house and I'll take care of mine." His voice came out so thick, so threatening, that the poor woman shrank in her chair. That's when something happened that marked me for life. My mother, trying to defend her friends and smooth over the situation, spoke softly. "Bob, the neighbors just came to keep me company. It doesn't cost anything to have a little joy in the house." That was it. It was like she had lit a powder keg. My father turned to her slowly, very slowly, and I saw something in his eyes that gave me a chill. It was anger, but it wasn't just anger. It was something darker, more dangerous. "Are you contradicting me, Elizabeth?" he asked, taking a step toward her. "In front of everyone, You're disrespecting me? My mother went white, white as paper. Her little hands started to tremble, and she shook her head no. No, Bob, I'm not. I just meant... But he didn't let her finish. He raised his right hand, very slowly, like someone about to slap, and my mother curled up, closed her eyes waiting for the blow. The neighbors were paralyzed, not knowing what to do. For a moment that seemed like an eternity. He stood there with his hand in the air. Then he looked around and saw that everyone was watching. He lowered his hand, but got very close to my mother and spoke softly, but in a tone that everyone heard. Later we'll talk about respect. Alone. The neighbors quickly got up and started saying goodbye, making up excuses, that they had to go make lunch, that they had forgotten a pot on the stove. In 2 minutes, our house was empty, just with the family. The cornbread cake was there on the table, cut in half, and that heavy atmosphere filled the whole house. My father grabbed his hat and left without saying anything else. I heard the sound of his horse's hooves moving away. My mother stood in the middle of the room, looking at the cake crumbs scattered on the floor. Her little hands were still trembling. That's when she bent down to start cleaning up the mess, and I saw something that broke my heart. She was crying, but trying to hide it. Thick tears ran down her face, dripping on the floor along with the cake crumbs. Mom. I started to speak, but she gestured for me to be quiet. Go play with your siblings, Sandra, and don't make noise. Her voice came out all shaky. That night, when my father came back home, I pretended I was sleeping, but kept my ear open. I heard them talking in the bedroom, but couldn't understand the words. I just knew his voice was low but hard, and that she only answered yes or okay to everything he said. The next day, Sunday, my mother appeared with a purple mark on her forehead. When I asked what had happened, she said she had hit the corner of the bedroom door during the night when she went to get water for him. But I was 15 years old. I wasn't a little child anymore who believed any story. And for the first time in my life, I began to suspect that those purple marks my mother always had, those bruises she explained as falls and stumbles, maybe weren't accidents at all. It was that Sunday that I also noticed that my mother started walking differently around the house. Quieter, more cautious, as if she was always paying attention to where my father was and how he was feeling. When he came home from work, she'd stop whatever she was doing and go meet him at the door, asking if he wanted coffee, if he was hungry, if he needed anything. And he started talking to me differently too. He was no longer that distant but respectful father from before. Now he looked at me with eyes that made me uncomfortable, especially when I was helping my mother in the kitchen and he'd stand at the door, just watching. One day, about 2 weeks after my birthday, he came home from the ranch earlier than usual and found my mother and me washing clothes in the yard. We were talking softly about women's things and laughing from time to time. When she saw him standing there watching us, my mother tensed up immediately. Too much work to be laughing like that, he said. Sandra, come here. I approached him, somewhat apprehensive. He put his heavy hand on my shoulder and squeezed hard. You're growing up, girl. You're becoming a young lady. But don't go thinking that because of that, you can be partying and disrespecting the rules of this house. You understand? I understand, Dad, I replied, feeling his fingers dig into my shoulder. Good, because in this house, I'm the one who commands. And what I command, everyone obeys. Your mother knows that very well, don't you, Elizabeth? My mother stopped scrubbing the clothes and looked at him. Yes, Bob, everyone knows. But when her eyes met mine, I saw there a cry for help that still hurts my chest today. It was as if she was trying to warn me of something, prepare me for something, but couldn't speak openly. That night, lying in my bed, I began to understand that my happy childhood in Clarksville was coming to an end. Something very bad was approaching our house, and I felt deep in my heart that my mother knew exactly what it was. Oh, my dear ones, the months that followed after my 15th birthday were the darkest of my life. What had started as threats and hard looks turned into something much worse, into violence that still hurts me to remember. My father started coming home earlier and earlier from the ranch, always with some excuse, that the work was lighter, that the boss had dismissed the ranch hands earlier, that he needed to resolve some things at home. But the truth was that he wanted to keep an eye on my mother, controlling every movement she made. The first time I witnessed him really beating her was on an October afternoon when the heat was scorching in Alabama. I had gone to get water from the well in the backyard when I heard a strange noise coming from the kitchen. It was like the sound of something hitting wood, followed by a muffled groan. I slowly approached the kitchen door and saw a scene that froze my blood. My father had my mother cornered against the wall, holding her by the neck with one hand and with the other hitting her in the face. It wasn't a slap. No, my children. It was a real punch, heavy, that made her head swing from side to side. "I told you not to leave the house without telling me," he yelled quietly, trying not to draw the neighbors' attention. "I told you that you couldn't go to Mrs. Wilson's house without my permission." My mother tried to explain, but could barely speak because he was squeezing her neck. "Bob, I just went to return the dish towel she lent." "Liar!" He gave another punch, this time in her stomach, and my mother doubled over, trying to catch her breath. "You went there to gossip about me, that's it. You went to tell others that I beat you." I stood there, paralyzed, not knowing whether to run to help her or go call someone. But before I could move, my father saw me standing at the door. For a second, our eyes met. I saw something there that I'll never forget. There was no shame at all on his face. There was no regret. There was only anger at being discovered. "Sandra," he said, letting go of my mother, who slid down the wall until sitting on the floor. "Come here." I didn't want to, but my legs took me to him. My mother, still trying to breathe properly, made a gesture with her hand for me not to come close, but I couldn't disobey my father. He put his heavy hand on my shoulder, the same hand that had just beaten my mother, and spoke very softly in my ear. "What you saw here never happened. Your mother fell by herself, hit the corner of the table. That's what happened. You understand?" I nodded yes, but he squeezed my shoulder until it hurt. "Say you understand." "I understand, Dad," I managed to whisper. "Good. Because if you tell anyone, I'm going to have to teach you too how a woman should behave in this house. And it won't just be with words, no. Understand?" At that moment, looking into his eyes up close, I understood that my childhood was completely over. I was no longer his protected daughter. I had become something else, a dangerous witness who needed to be controlled. In the following months, the house became hell. My father found any excuse to beat my mother. If the food was too hot, if it was cold, if she took too long to answer when he arrived, if she said something he didn't like. And always, always, he made sure I saw it. It was as if he wanted to teach me something, you know? As if he was showing me what a woman's place was in his house. I noticed he looked at me during the beatings he gave her, checking if I was paying attention, if I was learning the lesson. My mother started to become different, thinner, quieter, always with marks on her body that she tried to hide with clothes. She stopped singing while working, stopped smiling at the silly little things my younger siblings did. It was as if the joy had dried up inside her. And the worst part is that she started to distance herself from me too. I think she was afraid that if we got too close, he'd get jealous or suspicious. So she spoke to me only what was necessary, gave me orders about what to do in the house, but never again had those moments of affection we had before. One night, I woke up to strange noises coming from their room. I thought it was another fight, but it was different. It was my mother moaning softly, as if in pain, and my father saying something that disgusted me. "Stop crying, Elizabeth. It's your wifely duty. And now it's also your punishment for leaving the house yesterday without telling me." I covered my ears and pretended I was sleeping, but I understood that he hurt her in other ways too, ways that a 15-year-old girl shouldn't even know existed. It was around this time that my father started paying more attention to me. Not in an affectionate, fatherly way, no. It was attention that made me afraid. He noticed when I was growing, when my body was changing. Sometimes I felt him watching me when I was sweeping the yard or washing dishes, and that look gave me chills. One afternoon, when my mother had gone to the store to buy flour, he came home from the ranch and found me alone at home. My siblings had gone out to play in the street. "Sandra," he called from the door, "come here." I went, drying my hands on my apron. He kept looking at me in a strange way, from top to bottom, as if evaluating something. "You're becoming a beautiful young woman," he said, getting closer, "just like your mother when she was young." Something in the way he spoke made me very afraid. I tried to move away, but he grabbed my arm. "Where are you going? Don't you like talking to your father?" "I do, Dad," I lied. "Then stay there quietly." He ran his hand over my face, in a caress that had nothing fatherly about it. "Your mother is getting old, Sandra. Tired, but you're at the perfect point." I didn't quite understand what he meant, but the fear I felt was so great that I started to tremble. That's when I heard my mother's voice coming from the street, talking to a neighbor. My father quickly let go of me and went to sit in his chair as if nothing had happened. But when my mother came into the house and saw our faces, mine of fear, his of anger at being interrupted, she understood right away what had almost happened. That night, she came to my bed after everyone was asleep and whispered in my ear, "Sandra, never be alone at home with him again. Never again. Do you promise me?" I promised, but deep down I knew that such a promise would be hard to keep. My father was smart, patient. He knew how to wait for the right time, and I felt that time was getting closer every day. My mother knew it too. Lately, she looked at me with such a deep sadness in her eyes that it seemed like she was saying goodbye to me, as if she knew she wouldn't be able to protect me for much longer. And she really couldn't. My dear ones, the last straw that broke the camel's back happened on a Tuesday in December 1961. It was the time of the late Christmas bazaar in Clarksville. You know how it is. In small towns, the festivities extend. And there was a prayer meeting at the Baptist church that my mother always attended. She had asked my father's permission to go, and he had let her, but with one condition. She had to come back before sunset. That day, the prayer meeting went longer than normal because the pastor had announced some important things about building the new chapel. My mother had stayed to help the other ladies organize the church benches and clean the candlesticks after the prayer. When she got home, it was already getting dark, and I saw on her face the desperation of someone who knew they were going to pay dearly for that delay. I was in the kitchen preparing dinner when I heard her footsteps coming through the yard. My heart raced because I knew my father was waiting, sitting in that wooden chair of his in the living room, looking at the wall clock that mercilessly marked the hours. When he heard her footsteps, he didn't even look at the door. He just spoke, with that icy voice I already knew well. "What time is it, Elizabeth?" "Bob, I can explain," she started, taking the veil off her head with trembling hands. "The pastor asked the ladies to help." I asked what time it is. He cut her off mid-sentence without even raising his eyes from the floor. It's almost 7 at night," she whispered, and I saw her little hands were already trembling. "And what time did I tell you to come back?" "Before sunset," she answered, and her voice came out so low you could barely hear it. "So you disobeyed me." He slowly got up from the chair, and I dropped the wooden spoon I was stirring the beans with. My blood froze. "In front of the whole neighborhood, you disobeyed me. You made light of my authority." I ran out of the kitchen and saw my siblings, who were playing in the yard with some sticks and pebbles. They felt the heavy atmosphere and ran inside the house. Little Thomas, who was only 6 years old, clung to my mother's skirt, sensing danger like a frightened animal. "Get out of there, boy," my father ordered my brother, with that voice that didn't accept disobedience. "Go play outside and take the others." "No, Dad, I spoke, in a courage that I don't know where it came from. The words came out of my mouth before I could even think properly. Let him stay. He didn't do anything wrong. Nobody here did anything wrong. The silence that descended on the house was terrible. It was as if even the crickets outside had stopped singing. My father turned to me very slowly, with a face I had never seen, a face of pure hatred that made me want to run and hide. "You want to learn along with her too?" he asked, and his voice was so low, so dangerous, that it gave me chills. "Is that it? Want to learn how women should respect men in this house?" My mother, seeing the danger I had put myself in, pushed Thomas in my direction. "Take the children, Sandra. Take them and get out of here. Go to Mrs. Wilson's house and stay there until I come get you." But I couldn't move. For the first time in my life, I stood there, planted in the middle of the living room, looking into my father's eyes. There was a voice inside my head screaming for me to run, but there was another voice, stronger, saying I couldn't abandon my mother. "I won't let you beat her for going to church," I said, and the words came out firmer than I expected. She was in God's house, helping the pastor. She didn't do anything wrong. What happened next was an explosion of violence that still gives me nightmares. My father went to his room and came back with the leather belt he used to work on the ranch. It was a thick, heavy belt with a large metal buckle that he always kept well polished. When I saw him coming back with that thing in his hand, I felt my legs go weak. "Now you two are going to learn once and for all what a woman's place is in this house," he said, folding the belt and testing its weight in his hand. First he went after my mother. She tried to run, but he reached her before she got to the door. The first blow hit her back, and the sound of the leather hitting was terrible, like a whip cracking. My mother screamed and fell to her knees on the dirt floor. 26 years married to me," he said between the blows, "and you still haven't learned to obey." The belt went up and down, up and down. The metal buckle cut through her clothes and skin, and I saw the blood starting to appear. My mother tried to protect herself with her arms, but the blows were many and very strong. "Stop! Stop hitting her!" I screamed, and before I could think about what I was doing, I threw myself over my mother, trying to protect her with my own body. That's when he turned all the rage on me. The belt started falling on my back, on my head, on my arms. The pain was unbearable. It was like they were cutting my skin with a razor. Each blow from the metal buckle left a deep cut, and I felt the blood soaking my clothes. "A child who confronts me?" he shouted, without stopping the beating. "A child who doesn't respect her father? Then you'll learn together." My siblings were crying in the corner of the room, hugging each other, seeing that scene of horror. Little Thomas screamed, "Stop, Dad! Stop! You're going to kill her!" But that only increased his rage. It was as if seeing the children cry, seeing the fear on their faces, only fueled the violence even more. My mother, even bleeding, even broken with pain, managed to get up from the floor. I'll never forget her face at that moment. It was a face of total desperation, of a mother who knew she could lose her daughter if she didn't do something. "Stop hitting my daughter," she shouted, with a strength I had never seen in her. "Kill me if you want, but leave her alone. She's a child." And then she did something that changed everything. She threw herself on top of him and tried to snatch the belt from his hand. For a few seconds, they fought over the belt, pulling to each side. My mother was using a strength that came from desperation, the strength of a mother protecting her child. "Let go of that belt, Robert," she screamed, trying to twist his arm. "Enough! That's enough!" For a moment, it seemed like she was going to make it. She was managing to loosen his fingers, was almost taking the belt from his hand. But my father was much stronger, and the rage had given him extra strength. He gave her a push with all the strength he had. A violent, brutal push that made my mother fly through the air and hit her head on the corner of the heavy wooden table that was in the living room. The noise was terrible, a dry sound, like wood cracking, that echoed through the whole house. My mother fell to the floor and lay motionless, with a trickle of blood running from her forehead and spreading across the dirt floor. For a few seconds that seemed like hours. No one moved. The whole world stopped. Even my father stood there, looking at her lying there with the belt still in his hand. It was as if he himself had been startled by what had just happened. "Mom?" I called softly, dragging myself to her. My voice came out strange, almost a whisper. "Mom, get up. Please, get up." But she didn't move. Her eyes were open, but it was as if they weren't seeing anything. They were glazed, lost, looking at a place only she could see. I shook her shoulder. "Mom, answer. Talk to me." That's when she turned her head to me, slowly, very slowly, as if every movement hurt a lot. She managed to whisper with her voice almost fading. "Sandra, my daughter, listen. Listen carefully." "Talk, Mom. I'm listening," I cried, holding her cold hand. "When he sleeps, when he relaxes, you run. Go to Mrs. Wilson's house. Tell everything that happened here. Promise?" "No, Mom, don't talk like that," I cried even more. "We're going to leave here together." "Right now, I'll help you get up and we'll leave." But she shook her head, almost imperceptibly. "No, I can't get up. Sandra, there's something important. Pay attention to his belt. When he takes it off, look carefully at the belt." "What belt, Mom? Why the belt?" "Look carefully. There's blood. It's not just yours. It's not just mine." She was making a terrible effort to speak, as if each word was a mountain. "There was already before. Today, there was already—" At that moment, I didn't completely understand what she wanted to say, but I engraved each word in my memory. My father, who had been standing still this whole time, suddenly reacted. He approached us and said, in a voice that tried to be normal, "She just hit her head. She'll be fine. It's just a bump. Help her get up." But when I tried to help my mother sit up, she groaned in such strong pain that it broke my heart. There was something very wrong happening inside her body. "She needs a doctor," I told my father, trying to keep my voice steady. "She needs to go to the hospital in Montgomery now." "No hospital," he replied dryly, putting the belt back in his pants as if nothing had happened. "She just needs to rest. Tomorrow she'll be fine. Women are resilient." That night was the longest of my life. I carried my mother to her room, with William's help. She lay in bed, moaning softly from time to time, breathing in a strange way, as if each breath was a struggle. I sat on the floor beside the bed, holding her hand, feeling her getting colder and colder. Every hour I'd wet a cloth in the water basin and pass it on her forehead, cleaning the blood that wouldn't stop coming out. My father, after eating dinner, as if nothing had happened, went to sleep. I heard him snoring in the next room, a heavy snore of someone who slept peacefully, without any remorse. It was almost dawn when my mother opened her eyes and looked at me with a clarity that scared me. It was as if she had come back for a few minutes just to give me an important message. "Sandra, pay attention. Listen carefully. His belt, look carefully, when he takes it off, on the buckle. There's old blood, dried blood. It's not from today. There was already. From other times." "Mom, what other times?" "The times that I fell, the times that tripped. He always used the belt, always—" She paused, breathing with difficulty. "On the buckle, there's hair, my hair, stuck, for years." At that moment, a terrible truth began to form in my head. The falls down the stairs, the bruises, the purple marks she always explained as accidents. It had all been him. It had always been him. "Sandra, when I'm not here anymore, he'll want you in my place. Promise. Don't let him. Promise you'll tell everyone." "Mom, stop talking like that. You're going to be fine. Tomorrow, we're leaving here." But she shook her head. "I won't. I won't make it. But you can. You have to." She closed her eyes and didn't speak anymore. Her breathing became weaker and weaker, more and more spaced out. I stayed there, holding her hand, feeling life slip away little by little. When the sun rose, illuminating the room with a golden light that came through the small window, my mother wasn't breathing anymore. My father woke up, saw her there motionless, and put on an act that disgusted me. He started crying, calling her, pretending desperation. "Elizabeth, my wife, wake up, don't leave me alone." He called the neighbor, Mr. Charlie from the store, to help take her to the doctor. But everyone already knew it was too late. Dr. Stevens, who was the only doctor in Clarksville at that time, came to our house, examined her, and confirmed it was a massive heart attack. Her heart couldn't take the shock of the fall. And that's how my mother became one more woman who died of a heart attack in Clarksville. One more victim that no one questioned. One more secret that was buried with her. But I knew the truth. And worse, I knew that now I was next in line. When everyone left the wake, when the dust settled, I was going to occupy the place my mother had left vacant. Only this time, it would be different. Because my mother had given me a weapon. She had taught me to look at his belt. And I was going to look very carefully. My dear ones, my mother's wake was scheduled for the next day, on a Thursday. In Clarksville, back then, when someone died, the whole town stopped to pay their condolences. Our small house was packed with people, neighbors, friends, acquaintances from the ranch where my father worked, church ladies who came to pray the rosary. My father was playing the role of grieving widower with a perfection that disgusted me. He had put on the nicest black suit he had combed his hair with brilliantine, and received condolences with a face of suffering that fooled everyone. "Poor Bob," I heard Mrs. Wilson whispering to another neighbor. "Lost his wife like that, out of nowhere. A heart attack, so young still." "Yeah, poor him," the other replied. "And now he'll have to raise all these children alone." I was sitting in a corner of the living room, dressed in a black dress the neighbor had lent me, pretending I was in mourning. But inside, I was boiling with rage. Every time someone came to give me their condolences, saying, "Your mother was a saint," or "She's in a better place now," I wanted to scream the truth. It was during the afternoon that I noticed my father doing something strange. He was talking to Mr. Charlie from the store, receiving condolences when he took off his belt. He said it was too tight, that nervousness had made him swell. He hung the belt on a chair near where I was sitting. At that moment, I remembered my mother's last words. "Look carefully at the belt." I waited for everyone to get distracted with the prayers the ladies were doing around the coffin. Slowly, without drawing attention, I got closer to the chair where the belt was hanging. What I saw froze my blood to the bone. The metal buckle, which my father always kept polished and shiny, had dark stains encrusted in the folds. They weren't rust or dirt stains. It was blood, my dear ones. Dried blood, dark, that had been there for a long time. And even worse, stuck in the corners of the buckle, there were strands of hair. Light brown hair, the exact same color as my mother's hair. At that moment, everything made sense. The falls she had, the purple bruises that appeared on her body, the times she tripped on the stairs or hit the corner of the door. It hadn't been any of that. It had been that belt. Always that belt. My father hadn't killed my mother just the day before. He had been killing her little by little, beating by beating, for years. And no one had ever suspected anything. I was there looking at that terrible proof when I felt a heavy hand on my shoulder. It was my father. "What are you doing there, Sandra?" he asked softly, so no one would hear. "Nothing, Dad. Just saw the belt that fell from the chair." He looked at me with those hard eyes. "Leave that belt there. Don't mess with other people's things." But there was something in the way he spoke, a rush to get me away from there, that made me understand he knew exactly what I had seen, and I knew he knew that I knew. That night, after everyone left, and only our family was left in the empty house with my mother's coffin, my father called me to talk in the yard. "Sandra," he said, lighting a cigarette and slowly releasing the smoke. "Tomorrow, after the burial, things are going to change here at home." "How so, Dad?" "Your mother is no longer here to take care of the house, to care for your younger siblings. You're the oldest now. It's your responsibility to take her place." I felt a chill run down my spine. "What place, Dad?" "The place of the woman of the house, taking care of the food, cleaning, the boys, and taking care of me, too." He took a long drag on the cigarette and looked at me in a way that made me want to run. "The way your mother took care of me." At that moment, I understood everything. He wasn't just talking about household chores. He was talking about me becoming his new victim, taking my mother's place in every sense. And if I refused, if I disobeyed, that belt would be used on me too. I'm still a child, Dad. I'm only 15 years old. Old enough to learn. Your mother was 15 when she married me. And look how well she learned. He threw the cigarette on the ground and stepped on it. "You'll learn too, Sandra. The easy way or the hard way." That dawn, lying on the floor next to my mother's coffin, because it was tradition for someone from the family to stay watching over the body, I made the most important decision of my life. I wasn't going to let him break me like he broke her. I wasn't going to die slowly like my mother died. And I wasn't going to let that man keep pretending he was a victim of fate when in reality he was a murderer. On the day of the burial, which was on a Friday, the whole town went to the Clarksville cemetery. The pastor was about to start the final prayer when I did something that surprised everyone. I got up from the bench where I was sitting and walked to the front of the cemetery chapel where the pastor was with the prayer book in his hand. Everyone went quiet, looking at me, thinking I was going to say something beautiful about my mother. "Pastor," I said, with a voice firmer than I imagined I could manage, "before you start the prayer, I wanted to show something important to everyone who's here." The pastor, who was a kind man named Pastor Michael, was surprised. "What is it, my child?" Without saying anything else, I turned my back to the crowd and lifted my blouse. On my back, there were still fresh and bloody marks from my father's belt. Deep cuts made by the metal buckle, purple and black bruises that covered the entire length of my back. A murmur of horror ran through the crowd. I heard some women scream in shock, others started to cry. The pastor himself was speechless for a few seconds. Then I turned to face everyone and pointed to my father, who was sitting in the first row with the face of someone who had seen a ghost. "The same belt that did this to me last night, killed my mother the night before. He's not a widower, people. He's the murderer." The silence that descended on the cemetery was total. It was as if even the birds had stopped singing. Everyone looked at me, then at my father, then at me again, trying to process what they had just heard. My father got up from the bench as if to say something, but I didn't let him. "He's been killing her slowly for years. All those times she fell down the stairs, that she tripped, that she hit the door. It was a lie. It was him beating her with this belt." "Sandra, you're disturbed by grief." He started to speak, trying to use that worried father voice that fooled everyone. "Disturbed nothing," I shouted. "Look at his belt. Look at the buckle. There's dried blood from my mother stuck there, and there's her hair too, hair that he pulled out from the beatings he gave her." That's when something happened that I didn't expect. Mrs. Wilson, who had known my mother since she was a girl, got up from the middle of the crowd. I always suspected, always thought it was strange, so many accidents. She was crying, but I was afraid to say something. I was afraid of him. Other voices began to join hers. That's right, Elizabeth always had new marks. She became different in recent times. Thinner, quieter. Sergeant Thompson, who was the law enforcement representative in Clarksville, was present at the burial. He approached me. "Girl, are you sure of what you're saying? It's a very serious accusation." "I'm sure, yes, sir, and I can prove it." I looked directly into my father's eyes, who was as pale as paper. "Ask him to take off his belt. Ask to examine the buckle. You'll see my mother's blood that's still there." My father tried to back away, but there were already too many people around him. Sergeant Thompson was firm. "Robert, you're going to have to cooperate. Take off the belt." "This is absurd. My daughter is deranged with grief," my father protested. "I won't submit to this humiliation." But the sergeant wasn't joking. "Either you take it off or I take it off. You choose." With trembling hands, my father took the belt off his pants. The sergeant took the metal buckle and examined it carefully. After a few seconds, his face completely changed. "Good Lord," he murmured. "There really is dried blood here, and strands of hair." He looked at the crowd. "The girl is telling the truth." What happened next was like a storm. Everyone started talking at the same time, asking questions, looking at my father with disgust and anger. Some women came to hug me, crying with me. Others went to look at my mother's coffin with different eyes, finally understanding how she had really died. Sergeant Thompson arrested my father right there, in front of everyone. "Robert Silva, you're under arrest on suspicion of murder. We're going to exhume your wife's body for a more detailed investigation." When they took him away in handcuffs, he still tried to look at me with anger, as if I were to blame for everything. But I didn't lower my eyes. I looked back, firmly, until he disappeared in the dust raised by the police car. My mother's burial happened that same day, but now it was different. Now everyone knew the truth. Now she was no longer the woman who died of a heart attack. She was the woman who was murdered by her own husband. Slowly. For years. And I, who had spent 15 years of my life afraid of him, was finally free. The marks on my body healed over time. But they had served as the map that led my father to jail and saved my own life. The Clarksville justice system later confirmed what I already knew. My mother had died of internal bleeding caused by head trauma. The heart attack was invented to hide the crime. My father was sentenced to 20 years in prison for murder and abuse. My siblings and I went to live with our Aunt Helen, my mother's sister, who received us with all the love in the world. And it was there that I began to understand that not all men are like my father, that not all families live in fear, that it's possible to live in peace. My dear ones, here I am today, at 78 years old, telling you this story from my simple little house in Eastwood, Birmingham. It seems impossible that that 15-year-old girl who confronted her own father in a cemetery in Clarksville is the same grandma who's here now, making biscuits early in the morning to sell at the park. Life after that day completely changed. My siblings and I went to live with our Aunt Helen, who was a widow and lived in a bigger house, also in Alabama. She received us with a love I didn't even know existed. For the first time in my life, I knew what it was like to live in a house where people talked without fear, where no one lowered their voice when the man arrived, where children could play and laugh without worrying about waking anyone up. Aunt Helen was a strong, hard-working woman who sewed for others to support herself. She taught me to sew too, and for a few years that's how we lived, me helping her with sewing, taking care of my younger siblings, and slowly learning what it was like to have a real family. It was at Aunt Helen's house that I met my late husband, Joseph. He was the son of a friend of hers, a good, hard-working young man who had come from Birmingham to spend the holidays in Clarksville. I was 17 when we met, and he was the first person who made me understand that men could be affectionate without being violent, that they could have authority without being tyrants. We dated for 2 years, always under Aunt Helen's supervision, as was customary at that time. In 1964, when I turned 19, we got married at the Baptist church, the same one where my mother used to go to her prayer meetings. It was a simple wedding, but full of joy. Aunt Helen made my wedding dress with her own hands, and the whole neighborhood came to bless us. Shortly after the wedding, we came to live here in Birmingham. Joseph worked as a mechanic in a shop downtown, and I continued sewing at home. Our life was simple, but it was ours. We had 3 children: Catherine, who is now 58 years old and lives in Atlanta, William, who is 56 and works as a truck driver here in Birmingham, and the baby Mary, who is 52 years old and is a teacher at a school here in the neighborhood. Joseph was a wonderful husband for all the 45 years we lived together. He died 13 years ago of pneumonia, but left a good longing, you know? A longing for someone who lived a life of love, respect, companionship. Never, in all those years, did he raise his hand to me. Never yelled at me. When we had any disagreement, we talked, like civilized people. Today, my routine is very calm. I wake up every day at 5 in the morning, make my strong black coffee, a habit from the Clarksville days, and start preparing the biscuits. I buy fresh flour at Joe's Market, which is right near my house. I season them with sharp cheddar cheese. Sometimes I make some sweet ones with honey when I have a little extra money. I take the biscuits to the park around 7 in the morning. I already have my regular customers, Mr. Anthony, who works at the bakery and always buys 2 savory biscuits, Mrs. Mary, who comes to get a sweet one for her afternoon snack, the kids who pass by going to school and always stop to buy a little biscuit from Grandma Sandra, as they call me. I really enjoy talking to people at the park. I listen to some people's problems, give advice to others, hear the neighborhood news. It's a simple life, but it's my life, built with my own effort, without fear, without violence. In the afternoon when I come home, I get visits from my grandchildren. Junior, who is Mary's son, always comes to do homework with me. He's 12 years old and too smart. He wants to know everything, asks 1,000 questions about what life was like in the old days. Sometimes I tell some stories, the good stories, of course, about what Clarksville was like in my time, about the games we played in the street. I have 4 other grandchildren, too. 2 of Catherine's children, who live in Atlanta, and 2 of William's daughters, who come to visit me every weekend. The house becomes a party when they're all here. We make a big lunch, talk, laugh, and I look at this family I helped form and thank God for giving me the strength to get here. In the evening, I like to sit on my house's porch and water my plants. I have ferns, petunias, some small roses I planted in an old can. It's my moment of peace when I reflect on life, on how much I've been through, on how much I've achieved. Sometimes, when I'm there watering the plants, watching the movement on the street, I remember my mother. I think about what she would say if she saw how our family turned out, how the children she protected grew up well, how her grandchildren are happy and healthy. I think she'd be proud, you know? Proud to see that her sacrifice wasn't in vain. My brother Thomas lives nearby, too. He works as a construction worker and comes to visit me every Tuesday. We have coffee together and talk about the old days. William, my brother, not my son, still lives in Alabama, has a big family there. Franny got married and moved to New York, but always sends news. Here in Birmingham, in Eastwood, I feel at home. This is where I built my real life, where I raised my children, where I grew old beside Joseph. When I go out in the morning to sell the biscuits and see the city's movement, people running to work, children going to school, I feel enormous gratitude for being alive, for having made it here. I don't have luxury, I don't have material wealth, but I have something many people don't have. I have peace. I have the peaceful sleep of someone who did what had to be done, who faced fears, who chose the truth even when it was dangerous. I have the joy of seeing my grandchildren growing up in a family where love truly exists, where women are respected, where children can be children. And each biscuit I sell, each smile I receive at the park, each hug from my grandchildren is proof that it was worth fighting. It was worth having courage that day at the cemetery. It was worth breaking the silence. My dear ones, after telling you this whole story, my heart is heavy but also full of hope. Heavy because remembering all this still hurts, even after so many years. But full of hope because I know my story can help someone who's going through a similar situation. If you who are listening to me now live in a house where you're afraid, where you're beaten, where you're humiliated, where someone hurts you and then pretends nothing happened, I want to tell you something very important. This is not normal. It's not a man's way. It's not family custom. It's not punishment you deserve. It's a crime, and you don't have to take it. I know it's hard to report. I know that fear hits, that shame, that thought of, who's gonna believe me? I went through that too. I spent years seeing my mother get beaten and didn't know what to do, didn't know how to help. But when I reached my limit, when I saw that either I did something or I was going to die like her, I found a courage I didn't even know I had. Courage doesn't come out of nowhere, my children. It comes when we understand that our life is worth more than fear. When we understand that we weren't born to be anyone's punching bag. When we understand that our children, our siblings, deserve to live in a house where no screaming is heard, no violence is seen. That belt dirty with blood that my father used to beat me and kill my mother became the evidence that put him in jail. The marks on my back, which hurt so much, became the map that led me to freedom. Sometimes, our wounds are the only witnesses we have. Don't be ashamed to show them when necessary. Today, when I see my grandchildren playing in the yard without fear, when I see my daughter being respected by her husband, when I sleep peacefully without hearing screams or blows, I'm grateful I had courage that day at the cemetery. It was the hardest decision of my life, but it was the one that saved me. And for you who can help someone, pay attention to the signs. That neighbor who always has bruises from falls, that friend who's getting quieter and quieter, that relative who isolated herself from the family. Sometimes an offer of help, you can count on me, can be the difference between someone's life and death. In any country in the world, there are authorities and organizations ready to help those who suffer domestic violence. Look for them in your region. Seek help from the police, hospitals, churches, schools. Dignity and respect are universal values, no matter where you are. My dear ones who followed me to the end of this story, you who had the courage to hear this difficult truth, do something for this grandma here. Subscribe to the Grandparents' Tales channel and turn on the notification bell. It's not just to help the channel grow, no. It's because stories like this need to be told, need to reach those who need to hear them. How many women out there are suffering in silence like my mother suffered? How many children are afraid like I was? And leave just one word in the comments, one word that proves you watched until the end. Write strength. Because that's what saved me. That's what can save other people too. Do it now. Don't wait another minute. This story can reach someone who needs it today, at this exact moment. A hug full of affection from Grandma Sandra. May God bless you and protect your families.